Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life of Emerald. We stand for mind, body, and soul. We're a studio co-creating a positive movement by sharing ancient wisdom, spirituality, and practical healing strategies with thought leaders. A part of our 30-day happiness program, we host Dr. Fred Luskin with us today. Hi, Dr. Fred.
Hello there.
Dr. Fred Luskin serves as Department Chair of the PsyD program at Sofia University. He is a senior consultant in wellness and health promotion at Stanford University and the author of the best-selling titles Forgive for Good and Forgive for Love. On our fourth week, we were introduced to shifting perspectives, encouraging you to look at a situation with the perspective of flexibility. We've also established 5 of doing less practices and 5 of doing new practices to cultivate inner peace and happiness. I hope you enjoyed the activities. Now, according to Dr. Fred, forgiveness has been shown to reduce anger, hurt, depression, and stress, and lead to greater feelings of optimism, hope, compassion, and self-confidence. Today, Dr. Fred will share his insights on the benefit of forgiveness in our mental well-being and happiness supported by science. Welcome, Dr. Fred. What is forgiveness and why is it important and how do we forgive?
You know, life is unpredictable and life can be difficult. And very often life gives us things we don't want: illness, loss, change. We need strategies for dealing with that. You know, you need to be able to take disappointments and people's unkindness, process them and let them go. And the letting them go after the processing, that's forgiveness. It's like something happened, I didn't like it, I didn't like you, I didn't like myself, whatever it is, something happened. I hold it, I feel it, and then, you know, the next step is releasing it and coming back to a kind of openness to life again. The one other thing I'll say for that is, like, Desmond Tutu has a very famous line on, without forgiveness, there is no future. And what that means is that when you're stuck arguing with your past, it's much, much harder to have a sense of the present and future. Either that or you're so prejudiced about the present or future because of something that happened in your past. And forgiveness is like, okay, it happened. I didn't even like it, but the slate is clean.
Yeah, I love that last comment you made. The slate is clean when we choose to forgive, and grappling with our old self does not guarantee the future that we can create. Yeah.
Nothing guarantees the future. However, when people become bitter or when they get locked into the role of victim, when either of those happen, you make an unpleasant future more likely. So bitterness causes you to prejudice things in a kind of hostile light, and victim causes you to prejudice things in a more threatening light. And so both stances make it hard to see life as it is. And that's the real challenge. So in a very simple way, if somebody has a bad ending to a love affair, so, you know, somebody is cheated on or they're lied to, or somebody just doesn't come back home or something, you know, really difficult. You can hold that and say, well, I'm not going to trust people again. Well, when you say that, you're less kind and you're more eager to take offense, or you put more distance between you and the person. So you're making it harder for you to be successful in another relationship. Um, the, the growth that can occur, though, is instead of I'm not going to trust people, I do have to be more careful in selection. And I probably have to be more aware that other people are not always going to do what I want, and that relationships or experiences, they sometimes involve suffering. And that people's desire to avoid suffering by becoming either bitter or victims actually, I think, has an opposite effect.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been there, being in the other spectrum of feeling like a victim and bitterness. And I'm not there. However, I can see easily why people can go there naturally. And so could you speak to us about why is it part of like a human nature to go there from a painful experience? And is it a tool that we need to become aware of so we can, live we can apply the forgiveness and live a better future?
Everything's human. I mean, human beings exist in a really wide range of experience. Being human is to be cruel. Being human is to be selfish. We're all human. Even in terms of cruelty and selfishness, we're all polluting our planet. We're all taking more resources than we need, at least where we are. We're all happy to have enough food when, close to 1 billion people won't. So the human beings are a complex, difficult species. We're also at times incredibly kind and generous, but it all exists latent in us. The templates are all there. The question for each of us, based on our both tendencies, our history, and our decisions, is like, what kind of human being do we want to be? So some of us, we're hurt and we make a decision, well, nobody's going to mess with me again. So that creates a kind of bitterness and defensiveness. That's a very human response. Other people become very fearful. Well, I got hurt once, or this was terrible. And that's a very human response. And other people become really harsh and hostile. And that's a very human response. The question is, we have decision-making capacity to figure out or ask ourselves, which of the wide range of human responses do we choose, or do we want to focus on? The spiritual and religious traditions of the world all suggest that forgiveness will be helpful for you, that it will help you deal with disappointment, it will help you keep a kind of open heart, and it will help you get closer to a spiritual ideal. But we all have a decision and agency, and we live in a world with a huge diversity and a huge amount of choices. And we practice that which we want or we've practiced before. When I teach people about forgiveness, it's not like revenge is wrong. It's not like bitterness is wrong. They just have different consequences and they serve different purposes. For me, on the whole, I think we're designed to have certain more hostile, self-pitying responses first as protection, and then to work through those to peace. I think they're designed that way because short term, sometimes we may have to do things that are either protective or harsh. Long term, that's almost never of value. So it's all human, and it's all wired into our nervous system. And then by the things we practice, by the things we pay attention to, by the people we associate, that's what we become. the key piece for my work is that you can teach people to become more forgiving and therefore become a bit happier, that they don't have to be as stuck in bitterness and victimhood. And that turns out people appreciate that, that they like having another option called forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the idea of having the option of being kind and gentle and thriving after the painful experiences. And the forgiveness you speak about, for now, some of the audience might take it as a theoretical concept. So could you share with us, how do we practically do forgiveness?
I mean, forgiveness, like everything else, is a theoretical concept. I mean, love is a theoretical concept, but you have to be able to talk about it. And you can only talk about it using symbols, which are abstractions. So there is always a theoretical element of it. But if you're asking me what practices lead to forgiveness, probably the simplest one to add on is gratitude. That I used to think decades ago when I started to teach this, that forgiveness was in part an absence of gratitude. I mean, lack of forgiveness was in part an absence of gratitude. That and you have to be careful with this, because some people's lives have been really awful. But most of us, most of the, the people in the nice homes that we have, and with food on the table and running water, most of us have had a lot of blessing and a lot of opportunity. And it's very easy to forget that and take it for granted. And you have to work hard to forget it and take it for granted. Like it takes a lot of mental effort to wake up in the morning the way most of us do here in the Bay Area, or at least Silicon Valley, and have food in the refrigerator and running water and a job and clean air mostly. But we can wake up in that and then say, my life sucks because of X, Y, or Z. So you have to do a lot of not seeing to remain unforgiving. And so the simplest quality to become more forgiving is to become more grateful and appreciative, like to actively see more clearly what your life is. So if you wake up in the morning and you stumble and you get in and you see food in your refrigerator and you think, wow, there's food in my refrigerator, while like 800 million people might have woken up this morning without any, it's a little harder for me to feel so bad about what it is that I was like thinking they had harmed me for. When you look at the good that other people have done for you, that changes your whole perspective. If you think, well, this person's annoying, but they did X, Y, and Z, you don't have to like them all the time. But it's very different to remember the depth and complexity of things than just to hold on to what's wrong. So gratitude and appreciation are crucial. They are the crucial underpinnings of being able to see things clearly enough that you can forgive and let go of stuff. So that's one. And when I was teaching more regularly, that was a very basic practice. So like, we do a moment in the class, just recognize that you're breathing. That your body works and that you're actually breathing. And when these classes were done at the Stanford School of Medicine, and then I would say, but right across the street, there's a big hospital there with a lot of people who can't breathe. So you're all sitting here moaning and groaning because your husband didn't love you and your kids don't talk to you and all this stuff. And I'm sure it's true. but you're sitting here breathing and talking when there are lots of people who can't do that. So let's keep things in perspective. And that's probably the most important aspect of forgiveness, is to start telling the truth about your own life. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Because I know if you're teaching people things about happiness and positive psychology, you know, you're emphasizing the negativity bias. And we have a profound negativity bias. And so it's evolutionary designed to save our lives, but it makes us miserable. You can live with somebody and get furious them for not doing X, Y, and Z, or doing X, Y, and Z the wrong way. And you can completely forget all the ways that they were kind and generous. So that's one, gratitude and appreciation. A second one is, it's nobody else's fault if we're upset. Like, it's nobody else's fault. If they did something and we get upset about it, being upset about it is ours. And that's a thing that takes some time to learn. So again, if somebody does something that you don't like or that you resent, it takes a while to learn that they might have done this, that's true. But it's not their fault that I'm still upset about it. That's up to me. I can stay upset about it till the day I die. I could have given up being upset about it months ago. I could choose in 2 years, I'm going to stop being upset about it. That's on my calendar. So forgiveness is, again, a piece of truth-telling, and it requires some self-regulation that, well, if I'm upset, let me soothe myself. Like, you know, that person may have lied to me 4 years ago. So that's not the proximate cause of why I'm sitting here sucking my thumb now. That happened 4 years ago. I created patterns in me that have been reinforced and practiced enough and that are laid down in my nervous system that 4 years later I'm sucking my thumb. And that's fine. But it's not their fault that I'm sucking my thumb. They just did what they did. And I have my own independent way of handling it. So one of the key pieces of forgiveness is, when you're upset, calm down. Calm down. When you feel like a victim, remember all the ways that the world has been much nicer to you than you are to it. It's very easy. Like, when you feel sorry that, oh my God, this is so terrible, there were so many ways that the world has given us more than we've ever offered it. So all you have to do is remember one and relax and calm down and create some homeostasis where you can acknowledge that, yes, this might have been a terrible, hurtful, awful thing, but 4 years later, I'm responsible for taking care of me now. And there may be practices that I need to learn, and there may be therapy that I have to go to, and maybe I need to get better at comforting myself, or maybe I need stronger relationships. All that's true, but it's not their fault. And so right now, I'm responsible for me. So that's two. The third one is just a very simple cognitive reframe. But the world doesn't owe me a different life. A very simple CBT, cognitive kind of reframe. The world doesn't owe me more. It didn't make a mistake. Lots and lots and lots of people are hurt, and I don't give a shit. So why would I think that like everybody should care about me and the world should change? It's a cognitive reframe of it doesn't owe me more. The world is not wrong because I got hurt in it. What is again useful is where has the world been kind to me? Where has it benefited me? That creates some balance, but you also have to talk yourself down from how upset people get when their life doesn't look like the picture they had of it, of how life was supposed to be, and they start punishing life for being different than the picture. The one thing I'll say about that is the cognitive pieces and the CBT stuff, that does not substitute for grief. Like when you're hurt, there's going to be a very normal, healthy period of pain and suffering, and that's unavoidable. The forgiveness comes in when the grief starts to get perseverative and starts to keep you stuck. The forgiveness is to let go of grief. That's its purpose. So grief is healthy. If something painful has happened, it makes sense for a couple of months sometimes to just sit and suck your thumb, but it doesn't make sense for 4 years. And the last piece and the ultimate takeaway about forgiveness is it means changing your story. And so what people who forgive do is they stop telling an endless story of victimhood. They start talking more about their coping and their learning and their surviving and how they've grown or whatever it is they do. But they gradually give up the poor me, victim, the world screwed me over story. They put that to bed. They stop talking about it, and they come up with a better story, one that's going to help them live their lives, not one that keeps them stuck in a negative past. The story is the key piece of it. So whenever you see somebody unforgiving, it's because they're stuck in an unforgiving storyline that one needs to be stopped and then two needs to be altered. So in any kind of forgiveness training, there would be something along the lines of, well, when you want to complain about it again, just stop. And it will pass. And then you can tell a better story that's going to be helpful to you, going to give you a life, not reduce your life. So those are the, I would say, those are the simple, like teaching outlines of forgiveness that, those are the 4 practices that anybody can do that will lead one to a more forgiving stance around their own life.
Thank you for sharing that, your life's wisdom and the four guidance to forgiveness in a practical manner. The gratitude is a great tool to shift the perspective and shift our awareness from the victimhood, as you mentioned, to looking at, okay, what have I gotten more than I, put out? And so it immediately shifts our perspective. And you were mentioning, which I found really funny because I can definitely relate, is if I'm hurting, it's not anyone's fault, but it's how I am taking care of my responses, how I'm taking care of my way of looking at it, and with the story and the framework and the picture. And that I find that really quite funny because it's sort of paradoxical and it's counterintuitive. We tend to blame other people for, let's say, hurting me, but it's, you're flipping the paradigm and say, okay, it's none of their problem, it's my problem. Let me take care of myself. Let me take care of my story. That's quite funny.
And blame is one of those qualities that's linked with worse health outcomes. that people who blame more have worse outcomes and more incidence of disease. It's a very disempowering quality. When you blame, you're continuing to give your power away. You know, they did it, not me. It's my tribe or my group. They're the victim, so we're powerless. We're powerless. It's not wrong to notice what has happened and what needs to change. But the blame always puts the power somewhere else and reduces our responsibility for us to live as well as we can. And that's where it becomes an issue.
Could you speak to us about the role of forgiveness in the, collective scale? For example, two countries invade each other and one country feels like the other country owes them an apology. So, for example, Japan invaded Korea multiple times and annihilated the Korean culture, the dynasty, completely. And there is a sentiment in Korean culture, oh, Japan needs to apologize us to properly move on. And, when we look at the micro way of applying this forgiveness to our individual self, it's the same. Now, the blame doesn't help, the society move on past and have a cordial relationship with Japan, because today is today, past was past. So how do you advise perhaps politicians about moving on and forgiving each other countries' history?
It's very similar, but there's some important points in there, which is, one, there are things that we have to be alert to as threats. So if you walk down a street and, once every month the same person comes and beats you up, you have to be careful. That we have a responsibility to also be safe. That's different than hating the people who may have harmed us. Those are very different things. So if you're asking me about Japan and Korea, or, I've done work in Northern Ireland or Sierra Leone, or people ask me about the Middle East, it's not like you forget that this I may have to be careful. We may have to keep an army. We might have to hold some vigilance to make sure it doesn't happen again. Those are sensible things. What's not useful is like just having like hostile, harsh thoughts about the past, like feeling hostile towards anybody from that culture. Just because people in the past did something means you're not friendly to the people in that world now. Those are all unnecessary and reduce our enjoyment of life. But it's not any different in a marriage, It's like if somebody cheats on you a number of times, you have every right to say, wait, our trust is over, but it doesn't mean it does you any good to hate them. If they're a kid, you don't want to badmouth them. You don't want to use that to think that life has been terrible for me, therefore I have to be hostile back. All of those extra things are not helpful. But this is a world of some danger and some alarm. And just like we have an immune system to protect us from, biological invaders, you do have to have some concern. And so it's holding that energy without prejudice that's challenging.
It seems like we must apply the balancing act and balancing the, recognizing that the danger is possible, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah. And
But if you're completely unforgiving, then you don't have hope. And then it makes reconciliation or better relationship impossible. So if you ask between Korea and Japan, if you're just in the past with blame, then you can't meet people today with an openness. And so you cannot forge a different relationship. And that becomes very dangerous for everybody.
yeah, we took the Japan and Korea example for the example of a micro phenomena, you know, but this happens all over the world and even to our personal relationships. So this is a case study that we're talking about. And how do we implement forgiveness to recognize what can be possible, at the same time have a hope to move on to the better future, relating to one another, each country, each nation, and all that. So yeah, it sounds
there's a really well-known, like, kind of Sufi teaching story. And there's a snake that's attacking village kids, and the wise man comes by and says, "You don't want to hurt kids. They've never bothered you. Stop biting them." And so the wise man's vibration is so wonderful, the snake says, "Okay." The wise man comes back like a week later, and the snake is like barely alive, because now that he's not biting, the kids are attacking him. And the snake is just so angry at the wise man and said, "You gave me the worst advice. Once I stopped biting, they just," and the wise man said, "Yeah, but I told you not to bite. I never said don't kiss." And so that's the dilemma, like how to be protective but not aggressive sometimes, or hostile.
That's another funny story. It's all relatable. The stories we tell and stories we have from the ancient tradition, you know, it's very applicable to our positive psychology. And there's a wisdom in the balancing act. You know, we don't have to bite, or we don't have to be aggressive toward the other person, but protect ourselves. And those are really, I would say, they applies to finding the art of life, living life, art. It's very fine.
And that's where the story is so important, because some groups, they just tell hostile stories about other groups and make different countries or religions or colors, or they make them into enemies. And those stories make connection impossible. That doesn't mean that you forget what happens, but you find a way of telling what happens that you leave possibility of healing, and you leave possibility of reconciliation. And you also recognize that in the big human picture, these things happen all the time, and they're tough to deal with, but you lessen the chance that you or your group is just going to walk around like an angry victim.
Could you briefly advise us, our audience, how do we reshape our civilization, our world with a new story? We must tell a new story. That's what I hear.
I think that is a really important question, and probably a really important thing to look at just on its own. That what I used to say, or I do say when people ask me about the importance of forgiveness, unforgiveness is how we defend to ourselves our own cruelty. And it's a very dangerous thing. Like, you know, the reason I was such a lousy human being is that happened to me. Or the reason I'm yelling at you, my friend, is because you did this. Or the reason that I'm being nasty to my life partner is the life partner did this, or reminds me of when my mother did that. We use our unforgiveness to defend our own unkindness, hostility, bitterness. We use that to protect ourselves from both empathy and accountability. And it's the lack of forgiveness that keeps this world's endless violence and hatred going, because we all have some of it, and we all make enemies somewhere. And it's the new story would be, again, one of dealing with humanity's wounding, maybe without having to do so much wounding in response. But that's a big ask. The work I do is to try to just get one person to say, okay, Dad, you may have been lousy, but I forgive you, and you're welcome at Christmas. Like that would be sufficient for me.
That's beautiful.
It's true.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dr. Fred, thank you for your wisdom and sharing
You're welcome.
your life's work with our audience today. And for our audience, for deeper inquiry, Dr. Fred can be found on Google. He's everywhere on Google. Dr. Fred, do you have any last thing you'd like to share with our audience before we say see you later?
Well, as I mentioned to you before, the good stuff about the work that we did and others have done in the science of it, forgiveness is a helpful, healthy thing for mind and body and relationship, forgiving yourself and others. To me, the important piece is that you can learn it and practice it. It's not weird stuff. You go to a store and you buy a book, or you read a story about somebody who got hurt but didn't hurt back. You can practice it yourself. And that's the takeaway that to me is important. It's something we can all do.
World peace, I believe, happens within us first, by self, first in our micro relationship, and first it ripples out to the world and such. And powerful tool we have here is forgiveness, is supported by gratitude. And definitely I am hoping our audience can implement this. And as things are a practice, life practice, we try to forgive using gratitude. Sometimes we can, we may go back to feeling bitter, but what is important, in my opinion, is keep trying to shift perspective and keep trying to look for the goodness in everything, in everyone. All right, everybody. So this was the week 4, inviting our guest, Dr. Fred, in our expert session series. I hope you enjoyed our session and continue to build habits that supports your health and well-being in the mind and body. Thank you, Dr. Fred.
You're very welcome. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
You too. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.